Painkiller, it's a new show on Netflix. The first episode is titled The One to Start With, The One to Stay With. We both watched the first episode. We both have our opinions on it. But first, I wanted to ask you about The Blacklist.
The Blacklist?
Not the TV show, but the actual Blacklist that comes out each year.
You're talking about the scripts?
Yeah, the scripts.
Yes.
Now, do you remember any from 2013?
2013. I was not reading them back in 2013.
When did you start reading them?
I started with 2020.
Okay, do you know any from previous years?
Yeah, I think that there was one that dealt with the Sesame Street characters, but it took place with them being way older, and it's supposed to be a really dark take on them. Kermit is an alcoholic. I know that won one year, but I'm not sure when.
I would love to ask you more about that, but do you know any that have actually become movies?
I think that King Richard became a movie for one. And then Chain Can Dunk was another one. I actually read the script before that came out. I'm not sure about any others, though.
So those are more recent. A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood. That was a 2013 Blacklist movie. And it was actually written by Peanut from For All Mankind, Noah Harpster. You know who I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And his writing partner, Micah Fitzerman Blue. And both of them together created this show as well.
Painkiller.
Yes, also has Peter Berg directing every single episode.
Do you know how they were able to get Peter Berg? Because I did not know Taylor Kitsch was going to be in it, but when Peter Berg's name popped up in the credits, I was like, oh, that explains it.
Does it? Because obviously Friday Night Lights.
Also,
you went to Battleship?
I didn't see Battleship, but I know that he directed Battleship.
He created Friday Night Lights, which I think is his more connection with Taylor Kitsch. And then he also did the movie version of Friday Night Lights, which I had forgotten. I must have been
the one that came out in 2004,
yeah,
right?
The first rendition of the book. And so he was in charge of both of those. And it's weird because Painkiller really doesn't have anything to do with football.
Yeah.
It doesn't have anything to do with any sort of sports.
Is it fair to say that this is a sequel to Dopesick?
A sequel?
Well, it's just because Dopesick is so closely related.
Yes.
It was released in October 13th, 2021 on Hulu with a huge cast. You had Michael Keaton, Peter Sarsgaard, Will Poulter. We did the podcast for it. It was nominated for Golden Globes, multiple Emmys, and got critical acclaim.
It's still one of my favorite shows that we've ever looked at. I definitely finished it, and that sounds like I didn't. That sounds like I'm faking. But I did, and I'm sad to say this isn't Dopesick.
But then but that's my question, because 2 years later, this is created.
Yes.
It has a very similar premise. Even some of the characters portrayed in Dopesick are some characters portrayed here. And then you also have a huge cast. You have, because I looked up who they focused on in Dopesick. You have Matthew Broderick, Taylor Kitsch, West Duchovny. I'm sure more to come later on.
And West Duchovny, we've seen before in St. X. She played the older sister that gets
murdered.
I
remember, yeah. But it feels like it's trying to cash in on that same thing, and that almost made me not like the show as much, because it just felt like they were trying to literally ride the coattails of Dopesick.
I don't know if it's strictly fair to say that it's a cash grab, especially since it starts off the episode with a real live victim, or at least the mother of one of the victims coming out before the show, and I think they're going to do that in the other episodes.
That was the saddest part to me.
Yeah, and that was a real thing, and so I think they are trying to spread light onto it. But you're right, it reminds me of back in elementary school, when every student would have a presentation, book report, group project, and sometimes two people or two groups would be assigned the same topic, and you would get one kid who knocked it out of the park.
Mm-hmm.
Did an amazing job. You'd be learning the entire time. And then one who relied on the Cliff Notes. And you could tell tossed it together that morning and just kind of told jokes the entire time and distract them from the fact that they didn't actually read the book or something like that. That's the difference between Dopesick and this. I think Dopesick was a phenomenal show. And it's not the first time that we've encountered sort of a situation like this. We've done the Candy Montgomery story in two different ways, the Candy and Love and Death.
Love and Death, yeah.
And then there was also Gaslit and White House Plumbers, which was going over Watergate. But those looking for entertainment and also a way to learn about the opioid epidemic, there's so many other avenues to go through. Mm-hmm. You've got HBO, Netflix docuseries, PBS docuseries, Last Week Tonight segments, and Dopesick itself. If you just watch that entire series, you get so much more out of it than I can tell you're going to get out of this series.
Yeah, because Dopesick is more episodes too, right? I think Dopesick is 8 episodes, and this is only going to be 6.
It doesn't matter. The scripts are better. The acting, no offense, is better in Dopesick. Again, every article that was doing critical reception on this compared it it was impossible not to. And even if they were positive towards this, they were still saying Dopesick is the better of the two children. There are topics out there where they lend themselves to documentary series. A ton of World War II documentaries out there, a ton of them that are acclaimed, when you get to the opioid crisis, it feels like movies, television shows, like we don't need 5 things giving the same story and them just becoming more diluted as they go on. People have also pointed out that there's like this weird genre mix in this, and it's focusing too much on the comedy.
On the comedy.
Yeah, because for like we get 2 minutes of Edie, who's a made-up character for the show, which is fine if they're going to represent something, but we don't need to see them playing Tomb Raider for 2 minutes.
She's a made-up. I thought that she was for sure real. Because,
she's a compilation character of like a bunch of different elements, and they just decided to like incorporate her into one. But
what was the point of that Tomb Raider kid? Like that was literally 2 minutes.
It's comedy.
For nothing.
And then Edie refusing to sit in Sackler's chair. I'm pretty sure, even if that happened with like one person that they're basing her off of, like it didn't need to be shown.
Not only sitting,
like, they made such a big deal about it. It was like,
outside.
She kept on talking about how much she hated the Sacklers and Purdue and everything they represented, and how she was studious and had this strong work ethic. But like, there was too much telling, not enough showing.
Yeah.
You know, the narration, it felt like, was trying to fill in gaps, which really Dopesick was able to show during its storytelling. We also got a weird scene with Sackler at the very beginning with Matthew Broderick, where he's throwing fruit at a smoke detector.
That didn't even come into play later on in the episode.
He's also being super creepy with his dog at one point. I wrote down all the weird comedy that like it felt was just a distraction for me. And then all of this came at the expense of the fear and anger that it was trying to stoke.
Right.
You know, like why include these? We even had a scene where Beastie Boys just started playing in the background, and another review I read talked about the needle drops.
I actually like the soundtrack in this.
Did you? Okay.
Yeah, but I have the summary here. Told mostly through an interview with investigator Eddie Flowers. The story tracks the rise. Edie Flowers. The story tracks the rise of OxyContin. Flowers gathers evidence against the Sackler family's profiting from the drug, and then a tire company owner, Glenn Krieger, suffers a serious injury. Richard Sackler and his ghost dad, Arthur Sackler.
Yes. Which was, I will say, Clark Gregg is a guest star. For Arthur Sackler.
I thought he was going to be in the whole show because, again, you see him over Richard's shoulder.
He's not even in, like, the Wikipedia made cast.
Oh.
So I think he's just in this episode. But Arthur Sackler was presented in Dopesick, kind of in a similar fashion. They just didn't explain how he died. And I don't even know where they got that that thing where he went into the hospital and then he told them the entire time
what he has to do, yeah.
That was like a weird fact. And if it's true, it's interesting, but it didn't feel 100% true, and I couldn't find corresponding evidence about it.
His introduction was so stylized, and it kind of came out of nowhere with how stylish it was. I liked his introduction. I have it here as one of my pros, but it was almost, it was kind of jarring because the show hadn't done something.
Yeah, it was a backlash where they showed him giving a lobotomy to someone, and then following that with being. I think again in Dopesick they gave more background to him. I think it showed him and his like brothers or siblings and how they started a company, and then also him in the Senate and how he was able to. And I might be mixing in documentaries with the HBO one because I also watched that. But he was obsessed with art. So he did have a ton of art.
And I'm assuming he also marketed Valium. That was real as well. The blockbuster drug, as they call it.
But pharma reps and the idea that they're supposed to be these super attractive people who come in and like convince doctors in different ways, corrupt them sometimes.
That was so strange.
That's sort of true. Yeah, I mean...
That actually happened because that focuses on Shannon Schaefer's storyline. Again, West Duchovny. She's lured by Purdue Pharma's marketing tactics. The tactic's name in this case is Brit.
Yeah, it's weird because I'm somewhat going after the show for not being enough like Dopesick, but then there are other elements where it feels like they stole from Dopesick. And this is one where I feel like Will Poulter's storyline, Billy Cutler, he played in the show, he was the one who sold Michael Keaton's character so hard on OxyContin when it first it became like prevalent.
Yes, I think I remember seeing that scene.
His progression is very similar to what we're seeing with Shannon, except Shannon seems more desperate than he ever did, and it also just comes across like she's in a sorority. Like she's been, So it feels a little cheaper with hers. I have no problem with her acting, but it just, that whole idea is still true behind it, that they heavily incentivize the push of OxyContin, and they use bad charts, misrepresentative data, and brainwash their own employees. It's pretty clear that Shannon's going to go through a whole like arc where by the end she's going to have that like come to Jesus moment where she's going to like go and try to be the whistleblower to the whole thing. that's sort of what happened with Will Poulter, but they did it in a really subtle way with his character, and I'm not sure if they're going to do the same thing with West Duchovny.
And obviously, Shannon is not going to be the same character as Elizabeth Holmes. I know you were just saying how she's going to be the eventual whistleblower. I
can see why you would relate her to it.
But I do have The Dropout here as one of my comparisons, as well as Vice, because there were times in the storyline, specifically after they kind of introduced that storyline, where it seemed that it kind of became surreal with like the way you see just random explosions, sometimes random intercuts of
it was a Mr. Beast video.
and so then Vice, it kind of follows that same pattern.
It was interesting. The girl who was like her tutelage, her person who was the sorority mom or whatever. What's her face? Do you know her name in the show?
Britt, right?
Yeah, Britt, yeah. Exactly, yes. She was she was played by the same lady from Archive 81. I had to look that up. Looks completely different, but at the same time, like 100% the same. Just the different hairstyle and playing a completely different character, but it was weird to see her again.
I think I just like Taylor Kitsch because he was my favorite character on the Terminal list, and he's also my favorite character here, even though kind of the storylines that we've just been talking about, Shannon and Glenn, they're put to the wayside after they're introduced. They really do not come back until like the very end of the episode.
Yeah, and again, like Dopesick, this feels like they're stealing from it because Caitlin Dever played a character, and Michael Keaton also played a character where both of them got hurt in different ways. One was in a mining accident, and Michael Keaton's character, the doctor, was in a car accident, and both of them got prescribed OxyContin and then ended up abusing it over time and getting addicted to it. And that's just 100% what they're doing with Taylor Kitsch, who I last saw in the Waco series because I had watched that before I watched the Waco Actor.
I'm not sure how many scenes I can watch of people getting injured. That Glenn fall when he was on the tractor.
Oh, the sound they made. Because he fell onto like a piece of metal, or no, he fell in a way that just like made that sound that he said there was something in his back, but it ended up just being that his vertebrae was like broken or something.
It was one of those scenes that reminded me almost of Super Dark Times. There's a part in that movie where there's a sword that keeps on being waved around, and then there's a false sense of security where that sword is then put in the ground. Here, it's that I believe someone he's working with, Ty.
That's his son.
That's his son, yeah.
There's no reason that they didn't tell us, I don't think, at the beginning that was his kid, because I was so furious that he wasn't firing that guy on the spot.
Right, and also Ty is at their house later on, but he's in the tractor and he keeps on messing with the crane, trying to get Glenn to laugh, and I was like, oh no, he's going to do something stupid, The crane is going to hit Glenn, and then Glenn moves out of the way, and that's the equivalent of the sword being put into the ground, because I was like, okay, everything's going to be fine now, and then, just like in Super Dark Times, and this, something terrible ends up happening right afterwards, after it seems like the show was giving us a false sense of security, almost.
When you're behind the wheel of a machine that can do as much damage as a tractor, then I think you need a license for that, but also like there's no reason why anybody should be like even close to standing in front of it while your hands are on the wheel and you're playing with them. Like honestly, it was as much I think Glenn's fault as it was Ty's, but at the same time, like as soon as his son started doing that, he should have said, you're out and I'm not going to let you take this tractor until I can like trust you with this responsibility, because he's obviously under 18. But like how annoying was that kid? Super annoying. When I was watching it, though, every part of me knew that was the scene where he was going to get hurt. Because, again, like with Dopesick, you need the patient. They've shown you from every single side. You see the Sackler family. You see the doctors. You see the investigation going on. You see the people selling the pills. And then you needed the victim. And so the victim was going to be Taylor Kitsch. However, to me, it feels like, again, the subtlety wasn't there. He just got hurt, and then suddenly he's on Vicodin. The Vicodin's not working, and so he asked for something stronger. And the doctor, the goofy doctor, is just like, okay, we're going to try this new pill. There's no side effects except constipation. The thing is that annoyed me, they made such a big deal with Michael Keaton's one about the dosage size, and that was a big deal too back then, because there was 10 milligrams all the way to like 250 milligrams of these morphine pills, these OxyContin pills, and it was insane how much they were prescribing people and saying it was safe to eat. The guy just said, we're going to give you OxyContin. They didn't say it was going to be 10 milligrams or starting him off on something. So I wasn't able to see the progression of like him getting more and more addicted to it. It just seemed like by the end, when they showed him like reaching under the fridge to try to get one pill, I just feel like they're telling the same story that we've seen before with less of the truth and sprinkling in those little facts of like oddness that you don't really need to be helpful. Like I didn't need to know that Richard Sackler tried to make an orgasm pill in college. Like, that's something new that wasn't in the other shows, I can guarantee. I didn't need the scene where he's in front. It was like Air. Remember the Matthew did?
Yes, the movie that came out this year.
Yeah, but when he's standing in front of the shoe guy and he's like, we need to make a shoe for Michael Jordan. This has to be the best shoe in the world. It has to be different than all other shoes. But we have a shoe that works. No, we need a new shoe. That was exactly the scene that we get with Matthew Broderick as he's staring at this pill guy and he's saying, we need a new pill. We need a more stronger, a better pill. But they didn't even address the biggest elephant in the room, which was the reason they needed the pill was not only to be successful and not only because of his ego, but because they were losing the rights to the previous pill that they had. They had already been the Painkiller center for the longest time, Purdue had.
Yeah.
But because they were it had been like the, you know how copyright rights, they expire after a while?
Yes, right.
That was basically the same thing that was happening. So they needed this new pill. Otherwise, they weren't going to be able to sell the old one.
Okay, so you see, I saw different scenes of Dopesick, but I never watched a full episode of it, and I think that was actually a benefit to me because I was actually entertained by a lot of the scenes, and I was learning some stuff. I thought like some of the horrific, or maybe the most horrific scene in the whole thing was when Richard pulled out the Wong Baker Faces pain rating scale, and he was like circling 9 and 10 saying that the patients were given morphine at that rate, and then he circles the 5 and 6 rating scale, kind of the mid-phase scale, and he's like, this is when we should be giving patients oxycodone.
And that, yeah, the picture thing was a big deal in both the show and also the docuseries that I saw. The other way that you're probably benefiting from it is that you see Matthew Broderick playing Richard Sackler, and you're like, well, that's a perfectly good interpretation of the guy. Well, no, if you've seen Michael Stolberg on the Hulu series playing Richard Sackler, he does such an amazing job. Like, I cannot see anybody else but him being Richard Sackler. And especially when you start off a scene with Matthew Broderick doing comedy, it really pulls me away from the idea that this is Richard Sackler.
Do they portray his family in the same way? It felt like his family was almost Succession, where it was like this is like if Succession, if Logan Roy ended up actually just being a fraud and didn't have any money. It was almost like the same thing.
It wasn't the same issue. They weren't talking about the will of the Arthur, like about how he was going to disperse things and how he might have been broke. It was more along the lines of who's going to take up the helm of the family. And Richard Sackler was the one who was always wanting to do the new best thing. And but that competition, that Succession style lineage thing that you're talking about, that was definitely there. They did concentrate more on his father in Dopesick, so that there was like a little dynamic of in between. His dad never wanted to be like the kingmaker of the family. He never wanted to be the one like pushing the new drugs, but he did see his son, and at first he's very proud of him because he's taking up what his grandfather or what that guy's father had done.
Right.
And so he was kind of So I mean, there's just a little bit different dynamic, but as a whole, it's very similar.
So you do agree, though, that if you hadn't seen, not Succession, if you hadn't seen Dopesick, that this would be a good series, or like you would maybe give it a passing grade? Because I can tell right now you're probably not going to give it a 6.
I'm going to give it a 4 out of 10. It feels like a waste of time, honestly, to me. But that doesn't mean that overall it's got a 7.4 on IMDb.
Yeah, I mean,
on Metacritic.
I was going to give the episode a 7, but learning that Edie Flowers is not made up, and then
so is Shannon. Shannon's made up too.
I mean, but that one actually makes that one, it seems like you kind of almost need in the story. I'm going to give it probably a 6 out of 10 for that reason.
Also, the way Dopesick it does the timelines, I think, is a lot more a lot smarter than they do it here. They kind of mix and match here so that it fits the narration. And Edie, like, if she is representative of like 4 different characters that I remember from Dopesick, I don't know why they split them up. It is funny though that Edie's boss, I don't think we met him in this episode, but in Dopesick he's played by Jake McDorman, who I always confuse for the quarterback in Friday Night Lights. And but he's actually the guy from Greek.
Is he the guy from Shameless also?
Yeah, he's the guy from Greek and Shameless. But it was I was about to draw the connection between him and Taylor Kitsch, and then I was like, wait, wrong dude. Yeah, sorry, that was kind of a rant. And then Guardian gave it 4 stars. Rolling Stone gave it a positive review. The ones that gave it negative reviews were Decider, Collider, Hollywood Reporter, Variety, AV Club. And again, most places we're talking about just this is no Dopesick.
So it just sounds like it's mixed, really.
Yeah. That's what I said about Metacritic. And then Uzo Aduba, she played Crazy Eyes in Orange is the New Black. I can never recognize her in anything else from that because of like her hairstyle and stuff.
Wait, she's in this?
Yeah, she's the main character. She's Edie.
Oh.
Yeah, and I don't think that they wrote her particularly well because of just making her super emotional most of the time. When she's in the, like, she doesn't even want to talk to them until she sees that Richard's been deposed already. And it feels like they're speeding through all of the 90s and early 2000s, like, fight that they had to go through at the FBI and the FDA. And, like, I know that the municipal stuff is kind of boring sometimes, but it can be done well. And I feel like they're just missing that opportunity. So yeah, I've talked a lot here. You tell me some more of your thoughts on this.
I thought that in terms of like a 53-minute show, though, the pacing was good. Like, I didn't really have a problem with, I mean, some of the scenes here and there, like, that they were showing, I didn't think needed to be in there, but I thought that, like, I was never truly, I guess, bored. Like, I was entertained throughout. Nice. And again, as someone who hasn't seen Dopesick, I felt like I was learning some different things. I really didn't know about the Richard Sackler family. Obviously, I've known about the opioid crisis for quite some time, but as far as that goes, I also like kind of the performances in this. I thought that everyone did a good job, so that's where my pros come into play. That's why I'm giving it the passing grade.
And I'd be curious if you watched this entire series and then went back to watch Dopesick, if you'd hate Dopesick. Though I do think that you would respect it for what it does. If it's shining a light on the issue for people who haven't been familiar with the other series, then I can see why it's a good thing. It's not lying to you. So it's not going that far. It could be much worse if it was misleading you in a way. It's just telling you a story in sort of in an accurate fashion because, like, I would compare it maybe to 42, which got positive acclaim, but then I felt like they were kind of like being blurry with some parts to kind of like just speed through things. You know, it just... I don't like it when you combine characters, but especially when you combine a bunch of characters to represent such a big part about taking this thing down. Because that was what the big fight was about. It wasn't just that Purdue knew that OxyContin was bad for people. It was that every step that they tried to take, these guys would send their lawyers in and be able to maneuver their way around. They would even hire people from the FDA constantly to make sure that they would come to their staff and make sure that the approval would be good for every single country. But, yeah, so are you going to continue to watch it?
Probably not, no.
Oh, but you gave it a 7 out of 10. I feel like I've come in here, trashed it, and then it killed your...
Well, it's also just 6 episodes, and also I redid my grade to 6 out of 10, and even with the 7 out of 10, that's always kind of like a gray spot for me, where I'm not really sure, and it just seems like I should watch Dopesick if I want an actual kind of viewpoint for this story.
I'll leave it off on a positive note. Noah Harpster and Micah Fitzerman-Blue are already working on their next project. Do you want to guess what that is?
No.
The USA versus Vince McMahon. So, yeah, it's that trial, and I assume they're just making a series out of it. So that's cool. Yeah, all right. Thanks for listening. We'll see you on the next episode. Hope you enjoyed this one. Bye.
Bye.